It's the Anfield Wrap after a game of football, an actual game of association football that Liverpool have played. It wasn't much of one. It was 0-0 the Merseyside derby the other night, Sunday night. We are recording this on the Monday, but you might be listening on Tuesday, hence me being careful there for you. In front of me, I've got Josh Sexton, Rob Gutmann and Ben Johnson to talk about that game and to look ahead to the game against Crystal Palace. Gentlemen, first and foremost, becomes a strange evening, to be honest with you, John. I went quite the ride between feeling as though I was looking forward to seeing this Liverpool side, willing it to get going, feeling as though it was on the brink of genuinely beginning to put a performance in. And then about 20 minutes after that, I was more than happy to get out of there with just a point. And then by the time it finished, I was thinking to myself, oh, no, we can still grab all three here. It was more of a roller coaster than expected, while still also being quite a dull game.
Yeah, first half was almost a non-event. I think we were just trying to go. We kept getting space. We kept putting the ball in space in front of their defence, and then choosing the wrong pass or giving it away, and it was just killing us. And then we get the ball back and we move it about, and then we find space again, and then we lose it, and it kills us, and we start again. But all the way through first half, I'm sort of thinking this is coming here. It's not really showing that it's coming, but we've seen loads of these games this season. We don't really do much. We keep the ball, and then we score. And second half, I thought that we were just building the tempo. I think the commentator references it as well, but we're just building tempo, and then you'd have that ridiculous drinks break. And I for the life of me, I just think that kills the game. It stops any momentum whatsoever. I think it completely changes the makeup of the game, of all of the games. Not. I'm not saying about this game in particular, but of all of the games, you haven't got halves anymore. You've got four quarters, and the game is changed by that. I think it's ridiculous.
I'll come back to that, and then I'll bring Rob and Josh in. But I want to come back to that because Mo tweeted it a couple of days ago, and I thought it was a really, really good point. And everyone's talked about the 5 subs. We've all talked about the 5 subs. Everyone's gone on about 5 subs and what's 5 subs going to do. In fact, I think the drinks break is as profound a change as the 5 subs. And it's gone. It's just sort of passed everybody by at this point. But I think in terms of what it does, the opportunity for a bit of in-game coaching, a little bit that you normally just don't get, I think it has a real material impact on the games of football themselves. And we've all just sort of glossed over it until maybe this weekend when we've all got to experience it for the first time, when it's about a team that we support.
I think sorry, Rob. I just thought it was noticeable last night. I was watching it the other day and I thought this is mad because it does kill momentum. It kills momentum. It stops the game, and then it starts like a player getting injured. You go down, you're building ahead of steam. Someone goes down injured, stays down for 5 minutes. You have to start again. But this is planned. There's one in the first half. There's one in the second half. So this Liverpool team's brilliant, and has been brilliant all season at building momentum, crushing teams, not letting them out, and then scoring. But last night was the first evidence that, hang on, this might be a problem for us a little bit. Because we were just starting to get on top. Everyone was starting to get a little bit ragged. We hadn't created much, but the tempo was coming, and then the game stops, and then it goes a bit mad. Lovren comes on, and Matip gets injured. It goes a bit fractured then. But I just thought it was really noticeable last night.
What's the rationale for the water break? I mean, it's not like we're suddenly playing in the Mexican heat or in Southeast Asia here. I mean, we're used to playing football in August in England where the temperatures are this. We're used to playing it in May and late April. I'm not understanding the rationale here.
I think it is going to be very hot this week. So I think what they've done is they've preemptively sort of said, we will do this, and they're doing it for every single game, and they've just decided that's the way it is. So this week, for instance, on Wednesday,
27 on Wednesday,
27, 28 on Wednesday and Thursday. So I think it's preemptive around that. And I think it's the idea of, I think it's what the sports science people have wanted them to do. So I think it's difficult to sort of, to argue with, but it is a factor, therefore, when you're playing. If you're playing a night kickoff and it just happens to be about 18 degrees, which it was last night, it was actually a really good temperature to play football in. I'd say neither too hot nor too cold. You end up in this situation where they are taking it, and Ben's right, isn't he, Rob? Really, to talk about that it was a funny game for Liverpool's momentum. It never quite got to where it needed to get to, and there's some external issues in that, but there's also a lot of internal issues for the Reds in terms of getting that momentum together.
Yeah. It really did feel very pre-season. I mean, the only thing that wasn't pre-season about. It wasn't a mishmash of an under-23 side. And we didn't literally see two different teams in each half, although, there was certainly every move, the direction of travel at all stages was pre-season friendly, including the water breaks. And I just think it wasn't, the whole environment was not this, as Ben said, this is Liverpool's natural environment. There was a huge lack of sharpness. I do think what Ben described as our MO of how we gradually build this unseen momentum at times and then score our goal. I thought there was a key moment where Firmino drags that shot. It was a tight game and he needed to have done better, even if it was just to rattle the woodwork or force to save. It was the first time we'd really seen our counter-press work. I think Minamino and Keita acting as a pack. It got us back in possession. The ball comes in, Mane lays it off. Probably Firmino should have slipped Keita in, but he goes for the shot, and it's a very poor shot. And in tight games at a high level, you have to take your chances. It might play into some of the arguments that some people have put forward in recent times, especially the Werner thing falling out of place, is do Liverpool need a more natural number 9 at times, maybe, who will take those chances? I mean, Firmino's a good finisher, but that was a poor finish at a decisive moment in a tight game. And I thought we lost a bit of momentum after that. Really, we never quite were as fluent again.
The injuries, Josh, it felt like they impacted the match, not just the ones during the game, but also prior to it. Having no Robertson and no option of Robertson even from the bench. Salah may well have had a plan to sort of give him 15 minutes towards the end of the game, but then that gets taken from him. But in any case, Rob's just said there, there's an argument for a more natural forward or a more natural goal scorer. Well, Mo Salah is that, and we'll come on to talk about him a little bit more in a minute, but we didn't have him either. And then the injuries during the game, it did feel as though they did impact the match quite significantly.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in your written review after it that, not having those two left footers on the pitch sort of impacted Liverpool as well. And I think it was Salah's pace that was maybe missing the most. Ben referenced this in his rating as well about Minamino. He just looked like he needed somebody in front of him with that bit of pace, somebody who will get in behind a little bit more. We've got a few of those players. I'd put sort of Firmino and Keita in that category as well, who they're not the best at running in behind, but they're good at operating in the spaces in front of the defence. They're good in the little half spaces and they've got good footwork and things like that. But we just need another player, I think, who can run in behind. And when Chamberlain came on, I sort of think that's what Klopp wants him to do. But I think he's got it into his head so much that he's a midfielder and he doesn't do that. Then he comes on and just tries to do the role that Minamino was doing, and he's about a minute late to every challenge he makes and things like that. So I think it was one of them games where Liverpool never managed to quite sort of set the tempo of the game. I don't think they never managed to sort of get the space that they wanted.
Rob, there's an argument that every sub made Liverpool worse. That every single substitution, as they happened, Liverpool were the poorer for it afterwards, and not just a little bit afterwards, but a long time afterwards as well. I thought Gomez tried his very best, and at times you got to see that he's got quality and he's got good instincts. But fundamentally, he was a centre-back who was suddenly playing in a very attacking left-back role. And him aside, I felt all the other subs, no one comes on and really covers themselves in much glory. Lovren comes on and covers himself in much shit.
Smothers it all over his head.
Yeah. I didn't see that one coming. But yes, a cheer from the gallery. Yeah, he was shite. I mean, I'm not going to start on Dexy. Let's part.
No, I'm quite relaxed about Dexy. He's our fourth choice centre half. He'll be off in a few weeks. He's tried his best. He just can't jump anymore. No. Not being able to jump is a problem. But go on anyway.
He's a bit shite, and we could, I'd rather see Kiana Herver elevated, I think, than see any more Dexy in my life. But that's a show in itself. Yeah, you're right. Everything did make it worse. Setting the tone with the lively Minamino replaced by Chamberlain, who just wasn't very good, really. And then the lively Naby Keita, replaced by Wijnaldum, I think, is a good player, but I'd have liked to have seen him come on for someone who wasn't the lad doing well, Naby. And then the other injuries, the other changes are sort of enforced on us, are they? So it's hard to see. I'm a bit flabbergasted still about the Salah thing, because I think, from minute 46 going, do you think he'll get Salah on in a minute? Do you think he'll get Salah on in a minute? And then turning around, having a glass of wine, forgetting where I was for a minute, and then turning to my lad to go, do you think he'll get Salah on in a minute? And it just got later and later. What the fuck? It's not like we don't want to win this game, and it's not like he's now our best player. And it's not like he's not on the bench. I don't get it. I don't get why we were protecting him particularly. fair enough if he's been out a lot.
Well,
I suppose he has been out. They've all been out a long time.
But this settles into my thesis, Rob, overall on Klopp, which I've said on shows before. This isn't just off the back of this game, and it's an important point. But I think he's happy with a point. I think he's happy with a point at Goodison. I think if you offered him at the start of every season, you can have a point at Goodison, a point at Old Trafford, and you beat them both at home. 4 points from those games this season. Would you take it? You'd say absolutely. I think he's happy with a point, and I think that's something that we really do need to have a little think about. And I think that's in all of his approach. And as the game's unfolded in front of his eyes, and then when he's got a big moment to decide what he's doing, when Matip goes off, whether or not he's going to move, he could move Joe Gomez and get someone else into left back. He could move Fabinho back and drop Henderson and bring somebody else on there, and maybe even Mo Salah and shuffle his pack a little bit. He's quite happy to think, no, I'm happy with the way this game currently looks at 0-0. I'm happy with this. I'm happy with 0-0 at Goodison. Because, my God, he's had a lot of 0-0s at Goodison, and his only win comes in the 94th minute.
I think if Klopp was listening to this, he'd vehemently disagree with you, right? But that would make you wrong. Because I think what actually is playing, I don't think he's as literally, as consciously going, these are point games, and we play conservatively, and we've taken it before we've kicked off. But I do think he's taking a point with about 15, 20 to go in those kind of games.
Yep.
Because I think he's going, these are derbies. We don't need the psychological damage of a defeat.
Absolutely.
And the win's not as big as the defeat is bad. So I think you're mainly right. I think Jurgen would deny he's lacking. He would take that as a lack of ambition on his part.
I don't think it is. I've sort of made me peace with it now. In that, as my next point sort of goes on to make, Ben, is that it's very reminiscent of Ferguson from 2000 to 2009 coming to Anfield. He goes through that after Gerrard rattles that one in when we beat them 2-0. Almost every single time after that point, whenever Ferguson brought a United side to Anfield, and they were winning the league every other year, if not better than that. But they turn up to Anfield and they just match us up, look to keep it really tight, and hope they snatch one with a late John O'Shea winner or something like that. And that's all I'm saying here from Liverpool. That's all I think that Jurgen Klopp's attitude is: keep it tight. We don't concede. We'll play the situation that's in front of us. If there's a chance to get one, let's hope we nick it. But if we don't, absolutely fine. See you later.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think there's a fair bit of merit in it. It's just we've watched Liverpool teams for years whereby they attacking really well and then leave themselves wide open. Do you know what I mean? At the back, and you get diddled on the break, and so all of a sudden you've sort of dominated the ball. You've had all the ball. You've got beat 2-0. I think he's learned from that, and I think he's like, well, okay, there's 20 minutes to go. Fine, we're winning. We need 5 points to win the league, 6 points to win the league at the start and play last night. And I think there's a wider thing in terms of his selections last night, in that I think a lot of the stuff going through his head is this is really mad what we're asking these players to do with a limited pre-season. So we're going to make changes based on what we think's right to protect these players, rather than what's happening in the game. So he says after the game the Minamino one was pre-agreed because we just wanted to get 45 minutes in and we knew he was coming off, and it's not a slight on him. Now that might be him sort of trying to say that to not have Minamino feeling, why has he took me off at half time or whatever. But I think there's an element of truth. I think the Keita going off on 60 is we don't want him to get hurt because he's really good actually, and he's looking really sharp and he played really well yesterday. And I think he's thinking last half an hour, hasn't played for 4 months, whatever. Let's take him off. Let's not risk him. Let's keep him for Wednesday. And I think his logic is let's get through these next few games with as minimal impact as possible. Win the league in the next 9 games. However, whenever it comes, like we forget, we were talking about this last night, we forget we're obsessed with when it's going to be because of mad things like I need to book time off work and I need to know where I'm going to have a bevy because it's dead hard because nowhere's open. And so you're looking, you're trying to plan moving people out of houses so you can sort of come into your gardens, and you're trying to plan all this, and Liverpool are like, well, let's just play the games. And we play them each on the merits, but we play them with this plan of not killing our players too much. And so I think the gamble on Salah was, if we needed to win, we were desperate to win, and it was a really tight league. City with 3, City had won and we needed to win. Salah plays, and I think Robertson plays, and they play through the pain, and they're all right with that. But because it's not, and they think they've had a little niggle, what what's the point? The risk reward balance is just well off. It's like there's no reward here really. Let's just.
I thought we were watching a health and safety plan as much as we were watching a tactical plan. As you're saying, Ben, that it was like a first game of pre-season where the main thing was when they come out and go, the result was immaterial. It was just to get the minutes in our legs. Now, you couldn't say that, but it felt like that.
I thought so, and I think that plays out in the wider thing. And I think it'd be interesting to see. He referenced again before the game the other day this long break. We've got 8 days after Wednesday before we play again. So it's 2 games yet to ask, but then we've got 8 days. So I think he goes, okay, 4 points out of these first 2 games. Let's see if we can get it. Okay, let's go full pelt against Palace Wednesday, and then we've got a week. We can relax. We can build some. The players can flush the legs out. They've had minutes in the legs. Now we can go and we can really kick on.
Yeah.
I also wonder whether there's a thing that, when I wonder whether Salah makes the bench if it's not the 9 subs thing. I think if it's 7 subs, I do wonder whether he actually puts Salah on the bench. I think he's almost got a decision to make because of the 2 extra subs that he needs to almost get an extra forward on there. And I think he maybe just forces Salah to be on there and thinks, well, he can be there as a break glass. I think that the Minamino thing's dead interesting because I actually think that, like Klopp says, he basically says that, he was doing it just to test out the 5 subs and just to throw on at half-time and sort of see how it impacted him. I think you'll see a lot of managers start to sort of play these new things now, as Ben says, with the drinks break, how it's broken into 4 quarters now. You saw in the Arsenal-Brighton game that Arsenal scored just before the drinks break. Literally, once they've stopped celebrating, they have the drinks break. And I wonder whether you'll get managers who start to sort of wind up, or even just the team starts to wind up towards that point, nick your goal before the drinks break, and then you go and get it and sort of regroup from there and maybe change your shape.
Yeah, I think all that's really interesting, Josh, and the idea of the 5 subs. For instance, Adama Traore looks like the best 5 subs player in the world, as far as I'm concerned. If you just knew you could do Adama Traore in either direction on 60, either bring him off, having done an hour, or bring him on to do half an hour. I think I have a very, very close eye on. I'm pleased we've played Wolves twice, not just because of him in general. I think that Wolves could actually be the surprise package of this run of games. I think they might be very, very difficult to play against because they're good at taking time out of the game. They're good at playing the game on their terms, and they've got a couple of really strong weapons from the bench in Neto and Traore who can hurt sides. And I think that Liverpool, a few sides might end up moving in that direction as well and trying to work out what their arsenal is from the bench. Josh.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's maybe what Origi almost becomes for Liverpool during this little spell of games. Origi for me is almost always that sort of break glass option, and I think we've seen Origi as a sub this season a few too many times where he's come on to maybe make too much of an impact in the game rather than just nick a goal. And I think sometimes you'd rather he was just brought on to nick a goal rather than to affect Liverpool's shape or affect the way that we're in the game.
Rob, I was really pleased with Naby Keita. I thought he played very well. I thought he was the brightest in the first half. The shimmy of the hips. I thought he pressed well, intelligently. I thought he picked his moments, and I think he also looked physically pretty sharp. I think of him, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Minamino, players who've been a little bit on the fringe. Origi this season, who got some time yesterday. I think he was the most impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Klopp said in his post-match he started because of his form in the build-up phase, and we saw only in snatched highlights we saw that form. He looked very, very lively. I mean, I can bore myself with saying how much potential I think Naby Keita has. I think he's a really, really good player, and when you see him show that, you know exactly why they bought him. He's the perfect Klopp system footballer. It's just getting him on a football pitch. I think it's really, really. I'm crossing everything for his sake and for the team's sake that he gets through these 9 games now, and he can go, I closed that out, I had no injuries. I do wonder for him whether the enforced extra, 12 or 14 weeks, enabled him to, hoping has enabled him to truly get over maybe some underlying injury things, which he may in the past not have done. If you just cast your minds back to, I think he gets injured against Barcelona in the first leg of that semi-final last season, having played himself into a really strong vein of form. You remember he'd scored 2 or 3 goals, hadn't he? And he scored 3 and 6, in fact, and he was playing really well. He gets injured against Barcelona. He's not ready. In the African nations, he gets called up and plays and breaks down again. then Liverpool bring him back in pre-season. He plays, breaks down 2 games in, and his season never really got going. And although he had some nice little comeback phases last season as well with the Salzburg goal and a few other moments, I just wonder whether he's never had a chance to really heal this injury. I mean, I think it's a thigh injury. It's a thigh hamstring or an adductor that's been a recurring problem for him. And I've actually got one of these myself, so I'm feeling very close to Naby at the moment. I haven't been able to run for.
Did you miss the African nations as well?
2 athletes struck down in the prime, Jono.
I do. Yeah, I know. I mean, they would have called me up, but for all this that's gone on. But I fuck knows how I did mine. Gently jogging is not one of high twitch fiber muscle injuries that footballers get. I fucking got it, but I felt something go while I was running. Gave myself 2 weeks off, and I'll be fine. Went again. Gave myself 6 weeks off. Went again. Well, I had to stop. So I've given myself 2 months off. I'm about to start training again in a week. I thought, fucking hell, these the adductor injury. These are really, really nasty, these injuries. And they're fucking recurrent little shits. So I sort of wondered about Naby Keita. I think
I'm
sports science.
I was about to say I'm into a regular section on this show called Sports Science.
Can we do a version of the Agony Show where it's that a blag as well about injuries? Sorry, I've digressed. I've gone down a whole.
Yeah, you haven't. I actually think it's one of them, John. We're desperate, and this is the other part of this. We're desperate to beat Everton because it's Everton, and because obviously, as you said before, you've got a gazebo. There's plans afoot all over the place. There's a timeline here, for God's sake, Liverpool. There's a timeline. Please keep to the timeline. So we're living this reality, and Jurgen Klopp's probably thinking, just get Naby off in a minute. If that's a tidy enough hour, that'll do. And hopefully he'll remain sharp, and I don't want to put too much pressure or stress on him. And I'm a bit like, Jurgen, I need there to be more pressure and stress on him here because I'd really like to beat Everton for a number of different reasons, but also because it's Everton. And Jurgen is a responsible football professional, and I'm a divvy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It is interesting, and we're desperate to win yesterday because it's Everton, and we're desperate to win because we want to win the league, and we're desperate to win because we're used to Liverpool winning, and we watch them win every week pretty much, bar the odd occasion for the last year, and so it feels abnormal when we're not. But yeah, I mean, you come to the conclusion it's part of a wider plan. He just thinks, well, it doesn't really bother me. The lads are back. It's great. We've got 90 minutes in some legs. We've got minutes in other legs. We've done all right. We've got a bit of a niggle in Milner, and Matip went up with a sore toe, which is mad. Anyway, he stretched his toe. What the fuck?
Again, I've done that one as well.
So there we are.
Can we talk you through it? No, maybe not.
So, I mean, we've come out of the other side, all right. But I think the thing for me, that one of the things that I took from the game yesterday is when it's go back to the same old thing, is when that front three don't play together, then we look a little bit light in terms of trying to break players down. The one plus to that is Keita. If Keita can then play in that deeper role, then he's able to create space out of nothing. I think that type of game yesterday is perfect for someone like Shaq, who can do something mad out of nothing. And Minamino's not that player, although he's a good player. He's one of them you don't really want to see him playing on the right. I like him in the middle, you said before, Josh, because he's got all the skills that are about playing in close confines. He can pick a little pass, he can turn, he's clever, he can press, he can win the ball back, but he's not going to beat a man on the wing.
I want a Adama Traore. I want a Adama Traore. I'm going to keep saying it until he signs him. I want a Adama Traore.
But I think
to be Shaq.
I think we need one to be able to do something, because Trent and Robertson are not going to be able to play every game forever. And you seen last night, the main issue we had was no Robertson, so we had no switch, we had no outlet on that side, especially when Milner wasn't playing well before he went off, but he wasn't really in it. But we had no threat on the left. Mane was a little bit isolated, and then on the right, Trent stank. He just couldn't do anything. He couldn't do anything. I think the brilliant thing about Trent is he keeps trying to do the brilliant thing. He doesn't stop. He doesn't just play it safe, and that's what you need that position to do, because it's so attacking. But then if you've got these two around, them two, Salah, Mane, Firmino are our main attacking weapons. And last night we had what? 1.5 of them, 2 of them.
Well,
do you know what I mean? You're going to take goals out of that team. So I just think we need something in the middle if that's not working. And I know that's by trying to cherry pick and a little bit of cherries to go on top of the cake to go to ice them and all that. But we've seen that game a few times, but then Liverpool finds a way normally.
The thing here, Josh, is Mo Salah was bought on this day. It's really interesting that that's just sort of come together. And games like that one, I think they remind you why he's both really good and simultaneously really important. And the two things are related. But he can do a lot of what Minamino was doing in terms of harrying in certain areas, coming, showing feet, showing a lot of ability, hold the ball up quite nicely, lay it off. But he can also absolutely run and pin a side back, terrify them. So they drop 10, 15 yards. But then also, if they don't drop 10 or 15 yards, he can get in. But then he's really, really good in tight, confined spaces once they have dropped 10 or 15 yards. And then on top of all of that, he's also a goal scorer. And I just think last night was a really good example that, at times I think not just Liverpool supporters, but I think all of English football takes Mo Salah for granted. He is one of the best 5, maybe 10 footballers in the world right now. And that is something of huge significance. And when he doesn't play, you miss him so much that you end up trying to almost replace him with 2 players in Minamino and Oxlade-Chamberlain, because there isn't such a thing as one who can offer everything that he offers this team.
And to add to the list of things that you just said there of what he offers, I'd also say that he offers the mad thing that Shaqiri can maybe offer at times as well, where he just beats a couple of players and then wraps one into the top corner. He makes Trent's job easier as well. I almost felt sorry for Trent yesterday in terms of, I sort of agree with Jono, but I felt like he was trying to overcompensate for the fact that nobody was trying to beat their man down that right-hand side. I felt like just one too many times he was just trying to run it past his fullback and trying to run it past the wide midfielder they had sitting back there, and it just wasn't working for him. And what's great about Trent is that he keeps trying and keeps trying and keeps trying, but it was never happening in a month of Sundays for him. So I think you're right to say that about Salah. He's got a weird sort of reputation among Liverpool fans. I could never really quite put my finger on it, and I wrote something about it the other week as well. I sort of wonder whether it's like global superstar thing, which has sort of stung us in the past with the likes of Michael Owen and stuff. But Salah's not Michael Owen, and Liverpool are not the team that they were then. Liverpool are the best team in the world, and like you say, Salah's one of the best players in the world. And I think people just need to sort of, come to realise the fact that there's not many better places to be than Liverpool now. And I think Salah will know that, and he knows full well that this Liverpool side is getting the best out of him. And I just think that, games like that show how good Salah is, but it should be the games that he actually plays which show how good he is, and it never seems to be.
It's Robbie's. I was thinking the other day, I was having an exchange with Steve Graves over the weekend about some of the stuff that's around the ground that he's noticed, because normally there's loads of people around the ground and he just happened to be in the area. And it's noticeable that, for instance, there's nothing clear that memorial is probably the wrong word, but which recognises our greatest ever goal scorer and our biggest, the player who's got the most appearances for Liverpool anywhere around the ground. There's nothing about Ian's, Callahan or Rush anywhere. I mean, we're having a little chat about that. And one of the things that sort of occurs to me, it's different. Lots of people basically think Rushy just scored tap-ins. Yeah. And that's all he did. Like, he kicked it in from 6 yards. And when you actually look at any compilation of Ian Rush's goals, yes, there's a lot of penalty box finishes, but they're all different types of finish. Many of them are spectacular. Many of them are unstoppable. A lot of stuff is curled into corners in places where goalkeepers can't reach it. But there are some scruffy ones. And I think with Salah, we almost go the other way. We sort of remember him bending them in with his left foot, but we forget that he's got that relentless ability to be in the right place at the right time and get it into the back of the net. He has a driven nose for goals in a way in which Lewandowski does, in a way in which Samuel Eto'o used to do, in a way in which Ian Rush did as well. Like, I'll score the goal the game needs. Whatever the goal the game needs, I'll score the goal the game needs. And I think that's what Liverpool were lacking yesterday. When you sort of said before about a natural goal scorer, what I almost think is it's more the idea of that footballer who, whatever this game needs for there to be a goal, I'll score that type of goal and I'll make it happen. And I think that's what you're referring to. It's not just the idea of a fox in the box or someone who sniffs it out. It is that player who tends to wear number 9, but that player who's got that sort of implacable will that I will be the man who turns this game from 0-0 to 1-0, and that's what Liverpool didn't have, and that is what Mo Salah is.
Yeah, you're right that we were sort of deceived, I think, in his 45 goal or whatever it was season, that he scored so many of that one iconic style of goal that we thought that's the goal he scores. Whereas I remember watching him, all his YouTube bits before we signed him, and his goal, he'd done well in his goal scoring at Roma in that last season, and they were all tap-ins. They were all arriving late at the far post and nodding one in, tapping one in. And he's scoring more of that now for us. I think that kind of forward, he reminds me a bit of Fowler, actually, of our strikers, in the sense that if you watch his goals back, the non-spectacular ones, it's about how early he makes sure he gets a shot away. And it's just about the visualisation, and that it does play into the subconscious desire just to score the goal, and the realisation that you have to actually move a football in the direction, somewhere of a space between the posts, and that is your absolute priority. And I know it sounds bleeding obvious. He sort of almost takes it away from, like, I don't know.
No, this is really good.
You know, some strikers, like, I don't know. It's about. I think there's only a very, very small core of strikers I've ever watched who really understand the importance of getting a shot away early. I remember thinking Harry Kane understood that for a while, less so, but a couple of years ago, watching, I thought, you just make sure you get it away and you make sure that you're giving the ball a chance to go in that goal.
I think there's that, but what I've also said there, Ben, about moving towards being between the posts. What happens in that second half yesterday, which becomes really frustrating, is it feels like none of the players who are on the pitch are moving towards being between the posts. Mane keeps coming deep and showing for it. At one point, Origi pops up at left back, and it drove me absolutely berserk.
Stayed there for ages, didn't he?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. It was like, lads, what are you doing? He had about 50 touches.
The only player who appeared to have really weirdly that sort of desire to be overwhelmingly attacking and go between the posts was Joe Gomez. The rest of them, you know, it did seem this sort of, you keep moving away from that area, and that's what Mo Salah offers is, I will be arriving in that area. For me, the quintessential Mo Salah goal is almost, in a really weird way, that combines all of these elements, is the one he scores against City at home. When he's arriving onto it at that back post, but he's arrowing towards the goal. There is the goal. I am moving in that direction. Put the ball anywhere there. I'll get there first and it'll be in the back of the net. You just watch. Yeah. And that, to me, there was none of that. And that's where, you know, why the game did become frustrating. And that's why, you know, when to talk about approaches, there was a lot of Liverpool players supporting one another, a lot of nice little bits of approach play from 30 yards away, but there was no one basically going, put it anywhere around here and I will be sniffing it out desperately.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Without Salah, then you haven't got anyone really. Mane, I think they tried to counter that by putting Mane up front. I think they put Origi left wing and put Mane through the middle because it was obvious. You know, we took, as you said before, the changes made us weaker. But the attacking style of the first half, you know, trying to play into feet and Minamino on the turn and Mane arriving late from the left, trying to do that then goes as soon as Minamino and Keita are gone. So then what's our attacking game meant to look like? Because it looked like no one really knew. And it just become a sort of a toothless performance of keeping the ball and moving the ball for moving its sake. And let's see if something opens up rather than here's our actual plan for breaking down this Everton team. Here's the plan for what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. One of the issues is, you know, you're missing Salah, who's a natural well, he's a threat and he's a natural forward and he takes up when teams are defending on the edge of their own box. He takes up 2-3 men and open space for other people, and that's fine. If he does that, then there's more space if people are able to, you know, capitalise on that. What we had yesterday, there's no one really taking any, you know, Oxlade-Chamberlain, I could have marked him. He was crap. Do you know what I mean? So he's not taking anyone up because everyone's like, well, he can have it. And Trent was getting, as Josh said before, Trent was then getting it and was like, well, nothing's really happening. I've got no one around me. I'm going to have to try and do something mad to create something because it's just going to do this. Origi come on and had 1,000 touches at left back, trying to impact on the game, but couldn't. And so it just become a little bit aimless. And I think what we need to try and get back to is figuring out how to score and figuring out our attacking sort of style a little bit. Just become a little bit predictable, even though it couldn't have been because no one really knew what they were meant to be doing by the look of it.
I think in hindsight, Ben, he should have finished with the team that he started with. I think we ran out of late. When I looked at the team picked, I think I said it to you, Neil, in the week beforehand or the day before. I said I'm happy with Mane starting and Salah coming off the bench almost to replace him. at some point because none of them will have 90 in them really at this stage. That's why I was surprised that Salah wasn't part of the plan in that respect. In fact, as Josh said, his ideal was not to use Salah at all. So if you look back into Gary time again, you go, I'd really like to have had Keita and Minamino to play that last half hour, had an attritional first hour, draw, sting or whatever, and have them to bring into it. Whereas we really had a sort of tired Firmino and Mane at the end, and a Chamberlain who's just not as potent an attacking force as some of the other sort of front three cover lads, and Origi, who you never know what you're going to get.
Of the players who did the duration, or even who did the duration, Josh, I thought only really Van Dijk and Henderson hit their level, as you'd expect, to be honest with you. I think those two did look the part, over the course of the 90 minutes in terms of a pretty regular performance. I think everybody else was in and out.
Yeah, I think they're just the two that you'd put in the sort of camp of, well, they're Liverpool's two leaders, really, aren't they? The ones who lead by example and also lead vocally and things like that. And they're both the two consistent ones. Everybody else's level seems to sort of ebb and flow as games go on. And I think the Divock Origi thing that Rob mentions there is quite interesting, and talking about him having all the touch to left back, because I do feel like sometimes he's overburdened in the role he plays as a sub. I sort of touched on it before that I think he needs to be the one who's brought on, who, like Shaqiri, just comes on to do a mad thing. Is like when everything's getting a bit scrappy, he pops up with a goal. I think there's times too often where he's brought on and he's supposed to impact Liverpool's shape and impact the way Liverpool are feeling their way into a game, and I don't think he's that type of player at all. And I think one of the sort of bad things of playing him on that left hand side. Now I actually think he's better off the left than he is down the middle. I'd rather see him off the left than down the middle, because he's got that sort of cut inside and do the right footed shot like we saw against, I think it was Watford at home the season where he did it to really good effect and he played on that side. But I think he sort of overcompensates for what he doesn't quite offer defensively naturally. I think he does his own head, and then I think to an extent Joe Gomez is actually doing the same, overcompensating for what he doesn't have going forward by just being so far forward. And then it was mad because he was the only one who sort of had any real impetus to actually get in the box, as you were saying. So it just got to the point where I think one of the lads said it before, it was all just a bit too fractured, and I think towards the end of it, I think Klopp would have just taken his point, because he said, look, I've tried a few things here and they've not worked. Let's just go back to the drawing board.
Indeed. Last little bit on it is that the flurry from Everton. I think there's something in it, Rob, where, I think Everton were just quite happy to, again, not dissimilar to what Howard described sort of Klopp before. I think that Everton almost play their part in that they're almost just happy just to keep Liverpool frustrated and think, well, we'll get a moment of some description. In the end, they almost end up with three very, very close together. There's the Tom Davis passage, the passage of play that ends with Davis hitting the post. Richarlison gets another effort in, and Calvert-Lewin has a header at the back post in very, very quick succession. Apart from that, and it's strange because we didn't create very much at all, but apart from that, Everton don't create very much and don't look like they want to create very much. They just had that big 5 minutes where they had Liverpool on the ropes, and I actually think Liverpool wrest control back relatively well once that sort of 5 minutes is up. But it was a pretty terrifying 5 minutes that I could do without, and it reminds me how much I don't want to ever get beat by Everton.
Yeah, it's about echoes for me, and maybe I'm making a really obvious comparison. The last time Napoli beat us under Ancelotti.
The one this season.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I made the same comparison. I think there are, because we were the better side right the way through that, but we weren't creating very much. But we were clearly the better side, clearly on top. But then there was the mad penalty, and it just changed everything, and we couldn't get back in it. And it did feel a little bit like that game. Yeah, and they did create they frustrated us. Our final ball was errant that night, and it was last night as well. But they gave themselves a platform in the game to try and exploit the fact that Liverpool would overcommit. And as the game went on, the idea that Trent would increasingly overcommit as we became ever more in search of a goal gave Richarlison all that space in the channels. They finally managed to start hitting him there, and all the chaos, although that brief flurry of chaos comes from them hitting Richarlison there about 3 times, I think, in a relatively short space of time. But that's Ancelotti, isn't he? He's a very good example of a classic Italian coach who is able to allow a team mentally to, and I think to stand Everton in increasingly good stead over the next few years, is he'll take the panic out of them. And actually, I think we may have to brace ourselves for some derby disappointment at some stage, because the thing we've always had against Everton in the last 15 years or so is Everton play the derby rather than the football match and always do their own heads in. There were signs last night that they weren't doing that at all.
that they were just happy to just stay in the football match and be the team that could win it if the opportunity arose.
I think the issue is, though, it was easy to do it last night, wasn't it? Because there's no crowd.
Exactly.
If they'd have played, it was obvious what they were doing. They were sitting in, and it was rope-a-dope. If we get a chance, we go, we spring, and we go with these 4 players, and let's see. But we only do that. If they give the ball away, and we can spring, and they're exposed, and we're 3-on-2, which is what happens. Their first break, they haven't done anything. Their first break comes from Wijnaldum taking it off Fabinho and getting tackled.
Yeah,
loses the ball, and they're out the blocks.
We press ourselves.
They sense danger. But I'm not having it that they can sit in so passively if that's a home crowd in a derby. And I just think someone somewhere that's a difficult message to keep doing. Look, let them have it. If the home crowd's going, what they like, because you would be. It's a derby, you want to win. So if you're the home crowd, you're watching your team just sit there, you'd be getting a little bit, you start, that sort of pressure builds in the crowd. People start doing mad things, trying mad things. And Liverpool, it's all well and good, people saying, well, the benefits of by not having the crowd there, it probably made it a little bit more difficult for us to get space, because they just weren't committing any men anywhere, because they didn't need to, because there's no crowd pressure at all. So it's easy to follow your coach's instructions. So it'll be interesting to see if it happens in the future. I don't know.
He does look great, though.
He looks well.
Looks fantastic, doesn't he?
I think his clobber was great. He looks like he's had a good lockdown. He's lost a bit of timber, I think.
Yeah.
Long walks on the beach, apparently.
Yeah.
He looks well. And, he's a good manager. And he'll get a tune out of them over the years. But, I don't know. It's good beating them, innit? It was more fun when we won 5-2 and they were crap.
It was more fun when we won 5-2, and I think that we can't argue with the facts on that one, Jono. It just is what it is on that. I think that, most of the time that is the case. It was more fun to have beat them 5-2. All right, then I think we've covered just about everything working through that. We don't need to dwell too much on Dejan, because I suspect Liverpool aren't either. And he's trying his best. Anyway, just to mention, we did the hot mic last night. If you joined us, thank you very much for doing that. We'll obviously be doing that for Crystal Palace, but we'll also be doing it for Manchester City versus Burnley tonight, and for Tottenham versus West Ham tomorrow. I'm doing Tottenham versus West Ham. I've picked that game because one of my favourite things in all of English football history is the camera cutting to David Moyes, and he looks forlorn. So I'm hoping that we're going to get a fair bit of that through Tottenham versus West Ham. That's mostly what I'm in it for. David Moyes not looking like he entirely comprehends what's going on, but knows it is mostly bad for him. That's the thing I'm in that one for. Our friends, some of our friends, James Sutton, Mo Stewart and Amelia Bonner, are working with Standard Chartered on something called the Stand Red soundboard, and that can be used to accompany the games as well, so check that out and have a look at what they've been up to. I did a video with them last week. If you go onto Standard Chartered's YouTube, you can see that, and it was a lot of fun, so do check that out as well if you get the opportunity to do so. Loads of little bits happening obviously on the Anfield Wrap. We had quite expansive plans across the week. This team's going to be the death of me in my spreadsheets at this rate. Absolutely wrecking me head last night, the Reds. But we'll all be all right in the end, and we'll have lots of fantastic reaction to whatever Liverpool do. The points to the Merseyside derby last night, post-match show was excellent. Post-match pint was really, really good, and we had a really good laugh on AFQ, which set my evening up in a beautiful way. So do check everything out there and subscribe if you can. Obviously, I know for some people circumstances aren't great at the minute, so anything that you can do, but I understand if not, for obvious reasons. But the games are coming thick and fast. I mentioned before, City Burnley tonight. I mean, we're all expecting a City win, aren't we, Rob? Let's we're holding out very, very, very few hopes. You never know, you're looking at raffle. Perhaps they could be frustrated. It is worth saying that, a draw sort of puts us back to where we were with a view to Wednesday. So, it's not outlandish maybe to think that Burnley can get something, but they've got a number of injuries, Burnley. There's no Chris Wood. There's no Ashley Barnes. They've got very, very little to play for. They're on 39 points. I just really struggle to see anything but City rolling them. Yeah,
I'm tempted not to tune in, actually, just to try and tempt fate the old-fashioned way by not watching. I'd set my stall to sort of like bedding in with a few bevies and watching all our games, all City's games till this was done, but I'm not having this one tonight. No, it's an absolute banker. Chelsea City, 4 days' time is a much more interesting affair. and still the one I think I'm putting my money on us winning the league on that night. I think there's a fair chance of that happening.
I mean, it's the dampest squib. So I'm all over it now. The party, no. The damp squib, yes. But fuck it, let's have the league title, and then we'll worry about the details later.
Yeah. Absolutely. Describe your worst league title win ever. Fantastic.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
To be fair, it would have been worse. It'd have been better if we'd have won yesterday. But tonight's game, Monday night, City getting beat, it would have been a crap way to win it on a Monday. Especially, I'm hungover today, so I mean, I've got no interest in. I'm happy that I don't have to watch that game. I'm absolutely ecstatic about it.
We're doing it for Hot Mike.
I would need to speak to you about that.
It's a way to find out Jono's not up for it. You missed on the email 2 days ago, didn't you, when you were all happy and that? Enthusiastic on the email. Oh, yeah. We'll see what happens there later on. Josh, have you got yourself a team for Palace?
I think he's going to go as strong as possible. I was sort of speaking to my brother and my dad as we were breaking down yesterday's game, and I sort of just got it in my head now that we're going to twat Palace, but I actually think that City will keep winning, and I think it's going to set up the title decider against them, which I'm all for, because I'm sick of the pundits so far thinking that their best version of analysis is to go, the intensity's lacking a bit after this massive break, isn't it? It's like, well, yeah, it will a bit, but I think the one game they won't be able to say that for is if it's a title decider between City and Liverpool. I think that'll be the most intense football match you've ever seen in your life. But in terms of the Palace game, I think you go as strong as possible. I think in terms of what that is, whether that's a Keita and midfield situation, I think it'll be good to see Naby getting as many minutes as possible. And I think we've seen from his performances at Palace away is obviously one of the performances from Naby's career at Liverpool so far that sticks out. I think I'd like to see him get another game, and then I think the rest is just sort of as is. I think Joe Gomez goes back into centre half, particularly if Matip's injury is stretched toe is a bad one. I think we all obviously want Lovren to be as far away from it as possible. I do feel a bit bad for Lovren because there's confirmation bias around him a bit. But I was describing it to my brother yesterday, and it's like watching one of them cartoons where one bad thing happens and then loads of bad things happen straight after it. Yeah. Whereas if you compare that to a Joe Gomez, one bad thing happens to him and he gets better. Matip sort of just resets after a bad thing happens. But yeah, poor old Dexy is like an acne anvil falling on top of his head.
Yeah, it definitely have that sort of vibe of this. This is now going downhill. Was almost the demeanour.
You're all going down with me, yeah.
Yes, I want to be quite clear. This is now going downhill. Rob, what are you expecting? Are you expecting, as Josh says, effectively what we would probably presume is the first choice back four? In there, expecting Henderson to start with two others in midfield and the front three to be the front three. Is that what you think he'll do for Palace? Sort of,
but because we're in this weird phase where they're rehabilitating and it's a bit pre-seasony and there's going to be multiple substitutions, I think he's picking two teams the way he does in pre-season. It's just the way they go. So it might be for example, I could see Firmino not starting because he does fancy having him for the last 30-35. For example, I think the idea that he goes, I'm iconically going strong with the Champions League final team. I'm not sure he's in that mind. I think he's working towards the Etihad for that. I do think Salah will come back, but he might not see more than 55 minutes worth of action. And I definitely agree with Josh. I think he will be very keen to give Keita another go, but he might also be tempted to give Minamino another go and go, Firmino, I'll start with Salah, Mane and Minamino with Keita backing them up, something like that. Firmino is the late sub.
If he is determined to bring to play Minamino, Ben, if he decides that's the thing I'd like him to do. I'd quite like Minamino to get that opportunity to play through the middle and almost become, I think when it's Minamino in there, it'll be written down that he's at the apex of the diamonds, and sometimes that's the case for Firmino as well. But it'll be the apex of a midfield diamond rather than a 9 or a false 9, if you sort of see what I mean. But if he does want to go with Minamino, that's where I'd quite like to see him with that movement of Salah, the movement of Mane, those options around him, and someone like Keita joining.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more suited to his game, and it's what we've needed. We've needed someone who can do that role when Firmino can't play, because it's one of the things we've said it all last year. Firmino missing out, and Liverpool don't look anywhere near as good in terms of time and net play. And Minamino's got a lot of the similar qualities. He plays in a very similar way. So, yeah, I think he'll mix and match. I'd like to see Salah and Mane on the pitch at the same time. I think Palace are going to offer you something similar to what Everton offered. They're going to sit in. They're going to try and get a corner, a free kick. Zaha on the break. So we're going to need to have some creativity to break them down. And I think I'd like Salah and fullbacks. If you get both fullbacks playing and flying, and I'd like to see Keita. Ideally, you'd like to see Keita in a full strength side and ease the added impetus from midfield. You sort of got Fabinho, Henderson maybe a little bit deeper, and he's the added one who can go and help break a side down. Ideally, that's what you want.
I'd drop Fabinho. I'd put Henderson at the 6 and have Keita and Wijnaldum if in my strongest team at the moment. Fabinho's not fantastic at the moment.
Yeah, I thought he dealt well with his issues yesterday. To be fair to him, I thought, like for instance, but also I think he continues to make little errors, but he either recovers them immediately very well or just gets himself back playing, and I like that. All right then, Palace notes got a tidy win against Bournemouth, but it's a strange situation at the bottom at the minute. Listen, thank you very much indeed. After the Merseyside derby to Ben Johnson, Josh Sexton and Rob Gutmann. I hope you've enjoyed the show this week. Loads and loads of more fantastic stuff on the Anfield Wrap, but you know that by now. Whatever you're doing, take it easy, relax, and obviously still wash your hands.
All right, the Reds, thanks very much for watching another Anfield Wrap video. Thanks very much for supporting the Anfield Wrap all these years, and particularly during the current crisis that we're all going through. We'd like your support on one more thing, and that is your vote in the British Podcast Awards Listener's Choice. It's really easy to vote for the Anfield Wrap in this. Just go to the BritishPodcastAwards.com/vote. You can search for the Anfield Wrap there, select the Anfield Wrap, make sure you verify your email. The email may well drop into your spam folder or your trash folder. Verify your vote. You've voted for the Anfield Wrap, you've done your bit, and hopefully when the vote closes on July the 6th, we're going to win the thing this time, because we've come second 3 times now to BBC-backed podcasts, and this time we want to win it, because you know what our mate Bill said about coming first and coming second, and this time we've got a thirst for first. So do your bit, please. Nice one. Vote for us. Vote for the Anfield Wrap. Up the Reds.